Well, I've waited all day to try and record this. It's coming up to 6 o'clock and we've still got plenty of daylight, but it is quite blustery. And I've deliberately waited until now because it's been so windy. And it's still quite breezy, but I think the winds have eased off a little. So basically in this video, what we're going to do is I'm going to talk more about my mum and some of the trips and holidays and things like that we did. So I go way back when. So my first overseas trip was with my mum, and I was 6 years old, and I don't remember very much about it, but it was to one of her friends in Switzerland. I remember having a Paddington bear, which I still have, and I remember putting the Paddington bear on the aeroplane with the seatbelt. So the seatbelt was around me and Paddington, and I remember the air steward or air stewardess, whatever it was, saying that I had to take the bear out from the seatbelt. I remember that, and I remember that the family that I was staying with, or that we were staying with, the son, it was a bit like me. We enjoyed lighting fires. So I remember going, because it was quite a big house that they had with quite a big garden, and I remember going to their back of the back garden, and we nabbed some matches from somewhere, and we were lighting fires. And then when his mother found out, he told on me, and I got told off for it. I remember that from that trip. I remember going to pool with my mum and dad. Amazingly, we had a family holiday together. Don't remember very much about that trip. The interesting thing with that trip is that I have this recollection of going on a speedboat that someone took me out. But my mum and dad never had that same recollection, so I don't know whether that actually happened or not. I just have this recollection of going out on a speedboat. Again, I would have been, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years old. It's a very long time ago. But whenever I mentioned it to mum and dad, they never remembered that, so I don't know. Then I remember going down to Sandy Bay, down in Devon, for a holiday down there with my mum and dad and a couple of friends 1 year, and then a friend a second and the third year. And I remember when I was 16, with my mum and the same friend, we went to the Norfolk Broads. And we did a boating trip, on the Broads. And I remember that. I remember bits of that pretty well. So it was 16. That was when we had Judy, the infamous Judy, which I may have mentioned in other videos. And then in 1988, that was when the overseas trips started a little bit, not big. We started with Tunisia. And we went to Hammamet, and we were sold a scarf. Or something like that for some, and we didn't know how much. We hadn't worked out the currency. And after they sold us this scarf, we then worked out that it was about £20 or something crazy like that. And we were a little bit peeved that we spent so much money on this scarf. Anyway, so we did that trip, and really that trip did start something for mum, because the mum's always been, she's always been an animal lover. I mean, me too, but her mum kind of has always taken it a bit to the extreme. She always did a little bit for the animals. So when we were in Hammamet, we saw this little kitten. I had no idea how old it was, but it was a kitten. It wasn't very old, and we called it Alibaba. And we nabbed food from the restaurant, and we would take, you know, bits of meat out and feed Alibaba. And then we went home, and the mum started doing some research. Obviously back in those days it was all letters and phone calls and such. But anyway, she did some research, and she found a Tunisian or a East African, or North African really, a North African animal charity called Sparna. So if you like animal charities, you know, check out Sparna, Society Protection of Animals in North Africa. I believe they're still going. So we found out, or a mum found out, that they had a headquarters in Sousse. So of course we went back out in 1989, and we met Mr. Sadok. I will never forget Mr. Sadok. The most gorgeous, wonderful bloke ever. He was like tall, he was slim, he was quite elderly. He was probably in it, well, 70s isn't elderly, but you know, he was in his 70s. And he ran this rescue centre in Sousse for cats and donkeys and just about anything really. And it was just back then, we saw it years later, and they'd really done it up and, you know, and brought it into the 20th century. But when we first saw it, it was very much like when the Duke of Edinburgh said, was that light bulb put in by an Indian? It was very much, you know, light bulbs hanging out with wires, and, you know, it was very primitive. But they did their little bit, you know, for the animals there, and it was the real start of something, of an epic journey for Mum, really. And we went back to Sousse about 8 more times. So the first time that we went to Tunisia was Hammamet. I can't remember the name of the hotel. Then when we went to Sousse the first time, we went to the Hotel Scheherazade in Sousse. I'm assuming that one is still there. And then 8 more times, it may have been 7, but I think it was 8 more times, we went to Mahaba Beach. And we got to know the waiters there, the head waiter there. Every year we went, and the bellboy would recognise us, the management would recognise us. You know, we were like a permanent, once a year fixture. And it was really quite funny because we didn't go, certainly the first 1 or 2 years we went, or the first 1 or 2 occasions that we went, maybe the third, but the first 1 or 2 we were tourists. We did the camel riding, we did the going to the Sahara, we did the coach tours. So all of that stuff we did in the first 1 or 2 trips. After that, my mum's suitcase was full of cat food, and we basically went out to feed the cats. And we would go into the supermarkets because we never had enough cat food. The restaurant knew us, and it got to the point where the restaurant were quietly bringing food to us. They wrapped it up in in paper, and they sort of very quietly, because we always went down late and most people were clearing out, and I think the last 3 or 4 years we went there, the restaurant were giving us food to take out to the cats. We go into the city, either Sousse or Port Alcantawi, and we would be buying milk. Actually, no, I don't know if we bought milk or not. I don't know, because obviously you're not supposed to give milk to cats. We probably, I don't know, I don't think we did actually. I don't think we did. We got sardines. We bought tinned sardines. Oh wait, steady, steady, steady. Bella, steady. Steady. We bought tinned sardines, and we would be feeding, and we took bowls out with us. So Mum, she packed in, you know, plastic bowls and things like that. I think the saddest part of that was one trip, one of the years, and we were feeding the cats, and a couple walked past us, and they had this kitten. It couldn't have been more than a week or 2 weeks old. I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 weeks old, maybe. And they said, oh, we found this kitten over there, and it was by itself. They seemed a responsible couple. I don't think they picked it up, you know, and taken it. I don't, it's nothing like that. I think they had legitimately found it. So of course the mum took the kitten, but because it was the evening, we couldn't get it into the cat, you know, into the rescue centre. So we put it in my mum's bag, and we took it into the room, and, you know, we tried to give it. It was too small. It wasn't able to drink or eat. It hadn't weaned. It was really sad. That was really, really sad, because it got weaker and weaker, you know, as the night went by, and we got into the rescue centre first thing the next morning, and, you know, it was still alive, and they took it on, but they were so, you know, unless someone took it home and, you know, and hand fed it, you know, and had the time, and these people just didn't have the time. And to be fair, I don't think they had the resources either. But they took it on, and we went in the next day to see it, and it was still alive, but you could tell it wasn't for much longer. And we found out the next day again that it, you know, it had died. That was quite sad. That still brings back sad memories. But like I said, you know, we did our yearly pilgrimage, you know, to Tunisia, feeding the cats, and it really was quite funny, because my mum had this old beach bag, and it was a ratty old dirty old beach bag, and we pack it up with cat food and sardines and bottles of water and plastic bowls. And of course we were staying in a hotel, and most evenings in the foyer they'd have belly dancers and all this stuff. We frankly had no interest in that at all, but it was kind of funny really, because we'd walk past all the tourists to go out the door with this dirty old beach bag full of cat food. So you got all the tourists doing their touristy stuff, and then there was us going around the hotel, and I think the next hotel up, and occasionally the next hotel down, and feeding, you know, feeding all the cats. And then sadly my granddad died in 1994, but he left my mum some money, and I will admit she did go a little bit mad, and she actually ended up, I didn't realise that she was putting herself into so much debt, to be fair, because she was spending the money that he'd given her, plus a lot more. And it took her, I must admit, it did take her a few years to clear it all off. She was a bit naughty, but we did some really, really nice holidays. We went to Kenya twice. We did 2 safaris in Kenya. We went to America several times. We went to many states. I mean, between my mum and dad, we went to many states. In fact, there's probably more states. No, there's less states that I didn't go to than the ones that I did. I didn't do Alaska. I didn't do Hawaii, and some of the Midwest states and like the mid and some of the Midwest states I didn't do between them. But all the westerly states I did, or the southerly states I did, or the northeast states we did, and coming inland and up a little bit, like I think Dakota and North Dakota, and probably a few places around, around there we didn't do. But we did a lot of trips between the mum and dad, because as I mentioned in my previous video, mum and dad didn't get on, and they both enjoyed their holidays, and I went with and I kind of got double bubble, really. So I kind of went with both of them, and I was like kind of into photography. I did a little bit of stock photography back then, not much, but so I did take my camera and grab some pictures and things like that as well. Some of the memorable things with the American trips was Yellowstone, Old Faithful there. And my dad was very hotel, comfort hotel, car, everything nice and easy and safe. Whereas the mum was a little bit more adventurous. So, we did the RVs in Canada twice. I think once we went to Canada in an RV in 96, and then we went back in 97, early in the season and late in the season. Sort of Jasper, Banff, all that sort of area there. They were really nice. I remember when you drive from Vancouver to Jasper and Banff, the time zone changes. And the first time we did that, we didn't realise that. So when we were in, I think it was probably Jasper, because I think Jasper is the north one and Banff is lower down. It's so long ago, it might even be the other way round. I can't remember. But I remember that we were in either Jasper or Banff, and we'd gone into a like a little cafe for some breakfast. And I remember looking at the clock on the wall, and of course it was an hour ahead of what we thought it was. And of course I was trying to be very clever, trying to point out to the waitress, I think your clock's an hour fast. And I think she sort of said, well, where have you come from? And we explained, and then we figured out, the error there, that we hadn't changed clocks. We did Wyoming, and back in those days I was able to get into the Army and Air National Guard for photography. So one of the trips to Wyoming with my mum, I think she just waited in the little base or something, and they took me up in a Black Hawk. With my dad, I got up in a C-130 Hercules, and one of their the Jet Ranger. I forget the name of it now, but like the equivalent of the Jet Ranger, I think, or the Bell Jet Ranger, whatever it's called, that helicopter. And I also went up in a refueling tanker in one of the air bases in the 90s over there. That was with my dad. And I got a picture of a B-1B bomber refueling. That was pretty cool. I remember driving from Wyoming all the way down to the south part of Utah, and until some of my drives to the more northerly part of Scotland, that was the longest drive I'd ever done. It was over 500 miles in one day. That was an exhausting drive. But we did quite a few bits in America. I remember in Kenya, my mum did that trip through an animal charity called Care for the Wild, and the people who arranged it for us, they took us into Nairobi to have something to eat. And I remember, and apparently there were some gunshots in the streets, and because we said, was that backfiring exhaust? No, that was some gunshots going off in the middle of Nairobi. A couple of other funny trips that we did. I think my mum was realising that some of these trips were getting a bit expensive, so we looked to do something a little bit closer to home. So I remember once we went to Ireland. We had a trip in Ireland, and I'll tell you this. I think my mum would laugh at this. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing for a poor mum, but it was funny. And we were driving around about and everything. It's one of the funniest things ever. My mum needed the loo, and we found a public toilet, and I parked outside because I didn't need to go. So the toilets in this, they must have been made out of aluminium or iron or something, or maybe they were made out of drum making material. I don't know what it was. Anyway, Mum went to the bathroom, and there was a lady on the other side of the road waiting at a bus stop, and something happened in the bathroom. And I heard it. Bella, you didn't hear it, you weren't around them. And I think the lady on the other side of the road heard it, because I'm sure her head turned, and her mum came out, and she got in the car, and I said to Mum, "Did you fart in there?" She said, "Yeah, you didn't hear that, did you?" "Yeah." I said, "Yeah, and I think that woman over there did too." Oh my God, it was so funny. And I never really, because my mum was a very relaxed person. She wasn't one of these that dressed up with bras, and she was very much just let everything covered up, obviously, but let everything, very relaxed. Anyway, I think it was our first trip, or maybe the second trip. Actually, I think it was the second trip. I think it was the one in Sousse in the Scheherazade, and Mum had obviously bought a bikini. My mum, because she liked her fags and her booze, unfortunately, she wasn't a slim person. She was quite rotund, unfortunately. But she'd, for some bizarre reason, she'd bought a bikini. And it was so ridiculously funny, this. Until I either lose my marbles and memory, or until I die, I will never forget this. And Mum put this bikini on, and I don't know, it was a bit like in the Carry On films with Barbara Windsor, and it was like these melons. It was I mean, to be fair, I'd never seen them you know, with a bra like that, because she always wore just loose tops. And I think she put this bikini top on, and she looked in the, she must have obviously looked in the mirror, and I'll never forget it. She said, "Oh my God, I can't go out like that." And on went the loose-fitting top. And then she sat on the bed. And she started to sort of lean back. And I don't know, I think I can't remember whether she actually fell off the bed, or whether she just rolled so far and just about managed to stop the roll. But she was, as I say, she was quite a rounded person. Like I said, unfortunately, I think there was a lot of wine in her stomach. It's sad to think about, you know, someone like that. But she was quite a rounded person, and it was just quite this funny. It was just so funny. We both laughed our asses off, and those two things happened within like a minute or 2 minutes of each other. It was just so hilarious. Some other trips, and Mum was very much in, as I mentioned, Mum was very much into the animals. So she adopted every animal that you could conceive. Well, not literally conceive, but you know what I mean. You know, lions, tigers, sharks, manatees, just, you know, you name it, she adopted it at some point or other. And she found another charity. It was a bear charity. Oh, what was it called? It's still going now. It's the one that does bear rescues in like Thailand, Vietnam, because they were doing the bile farming, where they put the bears into ridiculously, you know, small cages where they can't move, and they stick tubes into their stomachs to get the bile out. And there's a charity that specializes in that, so her mum got quite involved with that. So we went out to Thailand twice and Cambodia. So we went to the elephant rescue centres, the tiger rescue centres. We went to Cambodia as part of both of those trips. The second one actually was with Sue in 2003, but we went out there twice. And with the trip with Sue that we did with her mum was, because obviously with our zoos you have the enclosures, and then you have like a 1 meter gap, and then like a fence to keep you away. They didn't have those over there. So Mum was walking right next to the enclosure, and this monkey reached out and grabbed the mum by the arm, and he gave her a right tug. She was really pulled and, you know, crushed up against the barrier. He let go eventually, but she had a big bruise on her arm. One of the other trips that we did there, it was the first one that we did, so it would have been about 98, 99, something like that, maybe 2000, I can't remember, it's a long time ago. But because they knew us, they let us they let us into the tiger, not literally into the tiger enclosure, but they let us into the inner part of the tiger enclosure, where the keepers went in to put food, put meat into the main tiger enclosure. And the tiger cubs were wandering around with us. And one of the tiger cub, luckily he didn't break skin. And luckily I had enough thought to not move and not shake and not do anything. And this tiger cub just bit down right in that space there, and I thought, I hope you don't punch a skin. Luckily he let go and he didn't shake or anything. And that could have been, I'm not quite sure how I got my hand quite so close to his mouth, but that could have been anyway, that was okay. I think my interest in outdoor clothing kind of peaked a little bit in Ireland, because when I was there I wanted a waterproof jacket, because I wasn't hiking. This was before I did any hiking, or I just went around the playing field, but I wanted a waterproof coat. And I remember going into a shop, and they had two waterproof jackets. One was a Barber and one was a locally made copy. And the locally made copy was about £100 or more, I can't remember, cheaper than the Barber. And I tried them both on, and I was like, oh, I really like the Barber, but that one's a lot cheaper. Anyway, as you can probably guess, I bought the Barber. And that was a really nice jacket. It was the Beaufort. And that was a really good jacket for traveling, because back then when I went overseas, I used to take like 30 rolls of Kodachrome film with me. And of course I used to have put it in the camera bag, and then that got heavy and that caused a few problems occasionally. But this jacket, I had a hunter's pocket in the back, so it had zips down both sides, and then at the back was just this huge pocket at the back, and it was the perfect size to carefully pack up about 30 Kodachrome films and put them in that back pocket. So I remember getting that jacket, and I got a waxed hat. It wasn't a barbered hat, but I got a waxed hat. So those are probably the main trips. Let's see. Those are probably the main trips that I did with Mum. We did a couple of smaller ones. We went to Crete, or somewhere like Crete once. We went to Zakynthos once. Because it was starting to get a little bit, because the Mum just wanted to keep going away on holiday. So we did a few more local ones. I remember in 1991, we were going to go to Spain. I don't know why we were thinking of Spain, but I think it was just maybe to do something different, because I think that was like the time where we were doing Tunisia, but we hadn't really got into it yet. And we were going to go to Spain, but first Intersun went bust. And then the Iraq War, the 91 Iraq War kicked off. So obviously, it wasn't safe to go over there. So we got our money back and we went up so that was really my first time to Scotland. So we put the car on I don't know if it still operates now, but we put the car on the rail car. So it was like the train but you put the car on it like a sleeper. So I think that took us to Edinburgh, and then we did about 2,000 miles. We just drove all around Scotland over about 2 weeks. We covered most of it. We didn't book anything. It was potluck, just, you know, finding, you know, a B&B each evening. Oh, and that was funny. I remember one of the bed and breakfasts. There was this Chinese or Japanese or Korean, or I don't know where they were from, but that area, they were probably, they could very well have been British. I'm just simply saying that they weren't British. I'm describing where they originated from. And two funny things happened. One, the lady that we were staying with had a dog. I think it was a bit like Lizzie. And this little dog would sneak into people's rooms, and we were wandering around, and then this dog ran past us with the girl's knickers. And we spoke to the lady afterwards, and she admitted that her dog would go into people's rooms and would walk out with all sorts of embarrassing things. And then the other thing that was, it made having breakfast very difficult, because this girl was having, I can't remember what it was. It must have been like a milky porridge or something. I can't remember. It's too long ago. Really, 1991. Anyway, she was drinking it and going, and every mouthful for about 5 minutes, or however long it took her to drink this, whatever it was like that. And the mum and I, we looked at each other, and we were biting our lips and our tongues not to laugh, because we could see that we both wanted to laugh our asses off, but we thought, well, we better not laugh, because it wouldn't have been very appropriate. But yeah, I remember that. Bella, I remember another, when we went to Cambodia, which was part of the Thailand trip. We went to the it's basically like a cafe restaurant pub now, but during the Cambodia War and the Vietnam War, it was the press that like where it was where the press went. I can't think what it's called. And it's on the corner overlooking was it the Mekong River or whatever it was? And when we were there, the first time, there was a load of children. It was just like loads of children. Not that many, but you know, a few, like half a dozen or a dozen. And I think her mum had an apple with her, and two children stand out. One was a small boy, and his name was Talon. I don't know how I remember that, but that was his name. We found out because we had a guide with us, and obviously he spoke the local language, and he drove us around. We went to the killing fields and everything like that. So we saw Talon, and then there was a girl. I don't know how old they were. 12. They weren't very old. And when we went back in 2003, this was the one time, because Sue came on that trip, and obviously she went everywhere that we went, but her mum she was like, you know, we got to go out and do things, you know, we can't just stay in the hotel. And I think Sue just wanted to relax a little bit as well. So on this particular day, Sue stayed in the hotel, and her mum and I went to back to this press cafe thing. I think it was like the Foreign Correspondence Club or something like that, maybe it was called. And because we knew that there were children there, because mum used K's, the old K's catalogue. So before we went out, we bought like half a dozen t-shirts and things like that. And when we were there, we went into our supermarket and we bought a bag of apples or something like that. And when we went down to the water, literally opposite the Foreign Correspondence Club, so we went into the club, we had a drink or something like that, and then we went over to the river. And on this occasion, the first time we went, we had the guide who took us around. The second time that we went, we just did taxi. And we left the Foreign Correspondence Club, and we crossed the road towards the river. The river's just opposite. It's there. And we saw 2 or 3 children. We never saw Tyrion. We never saw Tyrion again. But we saw 2 or 3 children. And Mum started handing out these t-shirts and apples. And within a minute, bearing in mind I had my camera with me, it would have been the Nikon F5 camera, so it's like the top of the range camera, and I had it. It was in the bag. Luckily, it was in the bag. I hadn't even taken it out the bag. It was in the bag, and the bag was over my neck. So nothing ever happened to the camera or the bag. But I'm just pointing out that I had that in the camera bag with me. And within 1 minute of the mum starting to hand out 6, maybe 10 t-shirts and a few apples, we were surrounded by 20, 30 kids. Just literally surrounded, and the hands were just all over us. And it was really quite unnerving. It's one of the most unnerving experiences of my life. And from nowhere, this girl, from the previous time that we'd been there, she recognised us. And it was crazy. It was like the parting of the Red Sea. She walked through all the children, and she took our hands. So she took, obviously she had 2 hands, so she took one of mine, one of her mum's, and she just walked us. It wasn't very far. It was probably, less than 100 metres to the Foreign Correspondence Club. But she walked us to the Foreign Correspondence Club, and of course they wouldn't let her in, which seemed a bit, I can understand it, because, but it does seem a bit mean. We did want to let her in, and, we would have got her something to eat, but, they wouldn't let her. They wouldn't let her in. But we had to get a, let's see, we had to get a taxi. Come on, steady. We had to get a taxi. And the taxi had to park as close to the Foreign Correspondence Club as it could, because it was all the children and more turned up while we were in the Foreign Correspondence Club. We were like trapped in there for like half an hour or something. And we got into the taxi, and the taxi was like inching forward because they were just children. Oi, Bella, steady, lassie. Oi. There was the place that everything, there was kids everywhere. And as we were like driving through these kids, they were tapping on the windows and the back of the windows. That was quite an experience that. And then we got back to the hotel and that was that. I've had one sort of life and death experience. That was on one of the trips with my mum. And it was over I think that was the first Tunisia trip to Hammamet. And it was like really rough waves that would then come up the beach, and then this huge backwash that would go, you know, back out into the sea. And I remember, because I love swimming and jumping waves and things like that. And I remember seeing all these people, they were obviously much better swimmers than I ever was, you know, out quite a long way. And I was inching further and further out. And 2 or 3 waves just took me down and were just smashing me. Luckily, it was sand. And just smashing me on the seabed. It wasn't deep, but you know, but it was still, it was scary. That was probably the scariest time I've ever had, because I couldn't get up. And then each time I was able to get up, the back pull, it just dragged me down. You know, you kind of like stand up and then the pull back, because it would have been up around your hips area like this. Bearing in mind, you know, I was probably 16 at the time, 17, I would have been 17 then in 1988, 17, I can't add up, 17. Because I was born in 71, so yeah, so I would have been about 17. And there wasn't much there wasn't much to me. I remember that. Oh, another trip that we did. We went to Dubai once. We had a week in Dubai. We hired a car for 3 days. We had a week there, but we hired a car for 3 days and then we got lost. And we were on the side of the road. No, sorry, I tell a lie. We got lost and we saw a house and we thought, sod it, we'll just go in, because obviously it was just a house here and then like, you know, a house a mile down the road back then. This is, God Christ, when was this? This must have been in the 90s as well. Bloody hell. So we knocked on the door. It was a gate, it was a gated, it was like a, you know, it was gated. We knocked on the gate and all we wanted was just directions. And they invited us in and they gave us bloody tea, you know, drinking tea. They were really nice, very nice. And then sent us on our way and said, you got to go that way to get back to your hotel. Yeah, so we did Dubai. I forgot about Dubai. We probably did other things as well that I can't currently remember. I know I got cross with my mum a couple of times. I remember once, this would have been in the 90s too. And Mum, she wasn't very good with money. She was not money wise. And she'd found out about this timeshare thing in Florida, and I didn't know anything about it, but she bought this. She bought something. I can't remember. I don't think it was a timeshare. That happened a bit afterwards. Actually, that was something else. But she bought something, and then from whatever it was that she bought, we went to Florida, and we hired a car. And this thing that she'd bought, the hotels were covered, but we hired the car because we were never going to do coach trips or anything like that. You know, everything that we did, certainly like in America and that type of thing, we hired cars. Obviously in Kenya you have a guide, and then Thailand we either had a guide or taxi. But I remember we did something in Florida, but they had her number, and they offered her something else it was either the Bahamas. Yeah, actually that was another trip that we did in 2001. We went to, I think it was the Bahamas or somewhere like that, and we had like a week in the Bahamas, and it was an apartment. She'd bought something to do with an apartment, but it was a one-off thing to get you there. And then when we were there, this bloke came over to us because we were sitting together. This bloke came over to us and he started trying to sell a timeshare where you pay £35 or whatever it was a month, and it entitled you to a holiday every few years or something. And I remember saying to Mum, just leave it alone, don't do anything. And I asked him to go away. And I must have gone off for some reason. And when I went back, that bloke, he must have waited for me to go. Because when I went back, he was with her mum, and she'd literally just signed the paperwork. And I must admit, I got a bit angry with her mum, but even more angry with him. I gave him a right mouthful. I mean, to be honest, she probably could have just cancelled it or something, but she didn't cancel it. And then for the next, I don't know, 5 or 10 years or whatever it was, she was paying 35 quid a month to this company, and she never used it ever again, which was just a little bit silly. But, you know, other than a few little hiccups, you know, like that, we had some really nice, you know, inspiring trips and holidays, and some really nice memories of holidays and things like that. And I remember the trip that we did we went to Utah. Again, this would have been in the mid-late 90s. And Mum knew that I loved driving. So she said, we need to get a 4x4. We'll find some off roads that you can drive along. So we went to Utah, and I can't remember, there's one part of Utah, if anyone's watching, there's one part of Utah, I don't know if it's Canyonlands, I think it's in that area, but there's one part of Canyonlands where there's a very high plateau, and then it drops off quite steeply down below, and when you look down into the valley, there's one area that looks like a huge Godzilla footprint has been put into the ground. It's huge, even bigger than a Godzilla footprint. A huge thing. And I remember we drove to the top of the plateau thing, and you could either stay on the road and kind of, you know, drive back down and around, but we'd done a bit of research on some of the off-roads to use, and there was an off-road that went to the left, and I don't think we realised quite how off-road it was. It was wide enough for one vehicle. It was up that side, and it was down a very long way that side. And I remember and it was steep, and it was quite turny like that. I remember going down it incredibly slowly with a foot on the brake the entire time. We came up to one point where there was this huge boulder had come over the road, and I remember thinking, the hell, you know, there was a gap to get through it, but it was tight. And I remember saying to Mum, can you get out and just go in front and just make sure we can get through this gap? And she refused to get back in the car because it was so steep. So she walked behind the car when I was edging down until we got down and it was not so steep. I remember that was, and we saw a coyote at the bottom. I know we saw a coyote going down there, which we wouldn't have seen if we'd have stayed on the road. When we went to Yosemite, probably not that trip, obviously. No, I think, because another trip we went to California and Yosemite, because the Mum wasn't interested in towns and shopping. She had no interest in that at all. All she wanted to do was to get out into the mountains, into the hills, and away from towns and people. She didn't want any of that stuff. If ever I wanted to go shopping or something, we always had a little bit of she was just not interested in any of that at all. So it was always a little bit of a fight for me to grab, you know, a few minutes just to, but it was fine. I mean, you know, I was happy going into the hills. I enjoyed going into the shops as well. I did more shopping with my dad. When I went with my dad, we did our shopping. Plus we would do the hills and things like that. But I know when we went to Yosemite, that was in a camped hut, a hutted camp thing. She wanted the experience of camping. It was glamping really, but there was no toilet, there was no shower. You had to walk about 100 meters to the toilet. I remember that. In 2005 we went to the White Mountains. This is one of the few times when I went away without Sue, because Sue moved in 2001, and obviously at that point I wanted to spend, you know, my time with Sue, obviously. But I knew that her mum missed going somewhere. So in 2002, we went to Jersey with Sue and her mum in the spring. And then later in 2003, that's when we went to Thailand with her mum. I can't remember if I did something with my dad that year or not. I can't remember. 2004 was when Sue and I came. Sorry, I tell a lie. 2002 was when we did the trips with her mum. 2002 was Jersey and Thailand. 2003 was the first time I came here with Sue for a holiday, walking holiday. We stayed in Widdicombe in the Moor. And we got married in 2004. And 2005, I think my mum and my dad was really missing doing, you know, holidays and things like that with me. So I think I went to Florida with my dad for a week or 10 days or something like that. I'm sure I did something with my dad, pretty sure. And then I did 2 trips with my mum. One was to a Greek island somewhere for a week, and then we did a week in the White Mountains, and that was the year when I used snowshoes going up to Mount Webster, which is next to Mount Washington. So if anyone knows that area, then you know what I'm talking about. And at the foot of Mount Webster, I believe it's Mount Webster, it's the highest point on the road, and there's sort of accommodation there. And the mum wanted to stay in there, and there was no toilet, there was no, you know, the toilet was, you know, you had to go, it was a corridor, go down a corridor, and there was a toilet down the corridor and the shower. It was very, very basic. It was basically a glorified hostel, really. So I know we did that in 2005, and I think that was really probably the last holidays that I did with, you know, with mum and dad, because then in 2006 the cancer came along with Sue, and that kind of effed up the next 4 years to 2010. And her mum always said that, you know, she wanted to do other trips, and I must admit I didn't really want to do anything. Things just weren't really quite the same for me after that, so we didn't do anything. But you know, we had some really, really nice, memorable trips in the 90s. I remember another funny thing. We were at the airport in America. I don't know which one. It was one of the trips with her mum. And we had the suitcases. And her mum she always let me do all the heavy work and everything. And we had the suitcases, and I was trying to get the suitcases onto the trolley, because we hired a car. We always hired cars in America, and I love driving in America. And I was trying to get the suitcases onto the trolley thing, and everything must have been on a bit of a slope or something. And mum must have seen that I was struggling, or she was just miles away. I don't know. And I said, "You've just got to stand there, or are you going to help me?" And then I got the cases on eventually. Then yeah. So yeah, we had some really, really enjoyable trips and experiences and everything else like that. Anyway, that's enough for this video. It's 7 o'clock. I got to look at the solar panel and see whether that's got that up to 100%. Check out my solar panel video. Anyway, if you've listened to this, thanks very much. I'll see you in the next video. Oh, I just remembered one thing that we did do. I did take a mum to the Lake District. I met Annie. And that was probably about, when was that? 2016, 2016. I took her to the Lake District. We had a trip up there. I know she was always getting brochures for cruises and things like that, and she kept wanting to go on a cruise. And she kept saying, come on, let's go on a cruise. And it just wasn't my thing, and you know, it just wasn't something that I was interested in. And I was older as well, and I wanted to, you know, do my stuff. So we never did that, but that's how it goes. That's how it goes. Anyway, yeah, I just wanted to add that on.